To make you the smartest person in the room, we sometimes have to talk about particular people that are important in the law, as well as important institutions that maybe you won't hear about anywhere else. So today we're going to talk about the death and the passing of the 84-year-old former Solicitor General of the United States to George W. Bush, a man named Ted Olson, a man that I knew, who gave me advice when I was a young lawyer. And let's talk about the conservative former Ronald Reagan attorney and former attorney for George W. Bush, Ted Olson, and his passing, and also the office of the Solicitor General and what it means for your rights. Stay tuned. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and author of the new law review article in the Georgetown Journal of Law and Public Policy entitled Dangerous but Not Unusual, Mistakes Commonly Made by Courts in Post-Bruin Litigation. This is a law review article I wrote to try to address how to apply the Second Amendment and the Supreme Court precedents of Heller, Bruin, Rahimi, and the like to modern-day Second Amendment lawsuits. A lot of mistakes out there made by courts, and to help people understand how to do it the right way, I wrote this article. Check it out. It's totally free. Just download the link from the Georgetown Law School. The link is in the description of this video. All right, folks. So again, to make you the smartest person in the room, sometimes we have to talk about things that are not necessarily obviously connected to the Second Amendment. But again, you need to know how the law works, these legal institutions, and some legal titans, to put it all into context to make you the best possible sort of advocate and supporter to totally understand the whole tapestry of American law, which you need to kind of understand to really make sure you protect, among other rights and liberties, the right to keep and bear arms. So, famed attorney, the former Solicitor General of the United States, Ted Olson, just passed away. Now, he has a fascinating life. You're going to want to stay tuned to listen to some of this, including touching fingers with his wife's death on September 11th, when her plane that she was on flew into the Pentagon. And Ted Olson was a legal titan, an amazing career, an amazing life, somebody that I knew, a conservative attorney, started his career very early as an attorney in the Department of Justice for Ronald Reagan, President Ronald Reagan. Was a very prominent private practitioner, argued dozens and dozens of cases before the United States Supreme Court Bar. He was a member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar. And he was the Solicitor General for George W. Bush from 2001 to 2004, where he handled many cases before the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of the Bush administration. Arguably his most significant claim to fame, Ted Olson, was that he was the lawyer who was the lead counsel on behalf of George W. Bush, then governor, in the year of our Lord 2000, in the fight between George W. Bush and Al Gore over who had won the state of Florida. We always know that George W. Bush won that state and actually should have won it more for reasons we won't get into in this video. And Al Gore was an election denier. But again, that's not the purpose of today's video. Beyond to say that Ted Olson, who just passed away at the age of 84, represented George W. Bush successfully all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court and won that big case, Bush versus Gore, that allowed George W. Bush to become the president during that time period of 2000 through, of course, or 2001 through 2008, of course. All right, so Ted Olson is a very important figure. He was the Solicitor General, and the reason why I want to bring that up again is the Solicitor General's office is very important for our freedoms and rights because they kind of dictate, in many respects, they don't dictate, but they're highly influential in what cases the United States Supreme Court takes. As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court will only take about 70 some odd cases in a given term. If the Solicitor General's office, which is the office within the United States Department of Justice that represents the federal government before the U.S. Supreme Court, if the Solicitor General's office, again, Ted Olson was the head of it for many years, if the Solicitor General's office goes to the U.S. Supreme, files a brief and says, look, this is a case that you ought to take Supreme Court and hear and decide, or not, That is highly influential. It's not dispositive, but it's highly influential to the 9 Supreme Court justices because the lawyers in the SG's office are very talented, members of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar. Many of them have worked for the justices and know the justices, so they're highly respected and trusted. The reason why you need to understand this is one of the most important positions, top 4 or 5 positions that we in the Second Amendment community want to ensure we get someone good in that position. In addition to the Attorney General, in addition to the head of the Civil Rights Division, in addition to the deputies of the Department of Justice, and the ATF, of course. We also want to make sure we get somebody who's good on the Second Amendment in the Solicitor General's office. It's very important because they have the ability to encourage the Supreme Court to take certain Second Amendment cases and have the ability to encourage or discourage the Supreme Court from taking bad Second Amendment cases. As you know, Merrick Garland, through his Solicitor General's office, forced the issue and pushed the Rahimi case, which had terrible, terrible facts, to the front of the line and skipped over a whole bunch of other cases involving the Second Amendment with very favorable fact patterns and sympathetic fact patterns to the Second Amendment. But because the Solicitor General's office under Merrick Garland rushed the terrible fact Rahimi case to the Supreme Court to try to undercut Bruen, it got to the front of the line and the Supreme Court wound up taking the Rahimi case, as opposed to another case like Brian Range, for example. So it's very important to understand the Solicitor General's office. Now, in addition to the fact that Ted Olson was the Solicitor General, he also handled a bunch of other cases because once you're in the Solicitor General's office and you handle cases there, you often get a lot of other cases after you leave the office. For example, he is the lawyer who won the Citizens United case, which Hillary Clinton hates, the liberals hate, because under Citizens United, a case that, again, Ted Olson won, basically says that the First Amendment protects your right to free speech, including your right to spend money on campaigns. The First Amendment doesn't just protect my ability to talk about politics and candidates. It also protects my ability to spend money on politics and candidates. And that's a big part of Citizens United, because under the campaign finance laws that existed before that decision, places like the New York Times could, basically pay out infinite money and earn media by writing about a candidate. And that was fine because they were considered the media. But if you're just an ordinary American, you couldn't get away with that. If you produce some media about a candidate, you might not be allowed to do that, and you might go to prison. But after Citizens United, that issue really largely has gone away with some restrictions, but by and large, the restrictions are much less now after the United States Supreme Court decided Citizens United, a case that, again, Ted Olson argued on behalf of and won for the First Amendment. Now, it's also worth mentioning that Ted Olson's wife, Barbara Olson, was killed obviously in the terrible events, the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Barbara Olson was a political pundit. And she was a political pundit and would appear on TV and all the big shows. Barbara was in Washington, D.C. and boarded that flight to fly to California for an appearance on television. Unfortunately, she never made it because her plane was hijacked by one group of the 9/11 hijackers, and it was flown into the Pentagon. Now, Barbara Olson was a true fighter, and I have very little doubt if she was alive today, she would be as aggressively defending Donald Trump and the Republicans against liberal attacks as anybody you see on TV or anyone you see on YouTube. She was super articulate, an excellent lawyer, very attractive on television, a wonderful lady, and a powerful political pundit. And it bears mentioning that it's been reported that the last words she ever spoke before she was killed with the plane flying into the Pentagon was, "What do I tell the pilot to do?" What do I tell the pilot to do? Were the last words, as far as anyone can tell, that Barbara Olson spoke before the plane hit the Pentagon. So a very impressive lady. That was Ted Olson's wife. Terrible situation, obviously. In fact, at the Federalist Society, which I'm active in, obviously, for the Second Amendment, Ted Olson is a sponsor of the Federalist Society. He sponsors an annual lecture entitled the Barbara Olson Memorial Lecture. always given by a prominent legal scholar or a lawyer or somebody important on an important legal topic. And that was endowed by Ted Olson in the memory of his late wife, Barbara Olson. So again, folks, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of knowing Ted Olson, some of the work he's done. You can read some obituaries and whatnot of some other cases he's done. They're pretty high profile. And also, of course, his role in the Solicitor General's office and why that's so important to our Second Amendment rights. Because, again, it is the voice of the federal government to the U.S. Supreme Court, and you want the person who is the Solicitor General to be a good advocate. And that's why we want someone strong on the Second Amendment, who's very smart and respected, who can go to the Supreme Court via amicus briefs and say to the Supreme Court, take this Second Amendment case or don't take that Second Amendment case or whatever it makes sense to advance and protect and restore our right to keep and bear arms across this country. So with this video, I just want to, obviously our thoughts and prayers go out to Ted Olson and his family. He was somewhat of a mentor to me. He's written me nice letters and was always kind to me and advice he gave me when I was a very young lawyer. And it is sad to see Ted Olson go, but he lived a long and a great life, passing away at the age of 84. So there you have it, folks. Hope you learned something here today. Look forward to talking to you again very soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.